Hi, this is Usha. Welcome to Rathod's IAS classes. Today in this lecture, we are going to see current affairs of 19th August 2021. In this lecture, we are going to discuss 8 topics which are very much relevant to UPSC. So let's get started with our discussion and let us see first topic. So before saying that, let us see which are the topics we are going to discuss in this lecture. So first one, we are going to talking about Sharia law. So here Taliban says that there will be no democracy, only we will follow Sharia law. So in this context, you need to know what is this Sharia law as an UPSC aspirant. So this article will be important regarding international relations, which comes under GS paper 2. And next topic we are going to talk about, that is collegium. So if you open your Lakshmikant and if you see judiciary and as well as the judicial cases, that is first judge case, second judge case, third judge case and fourth judge case, actually that led to formation of this NGAC Act, but this made unconstitutional and we came back to this collegium system. So this collegium system, it is mainly regarding this appointment of judges for Supreme Court and as well as High Court. So there is one important development regarding this appointment of judges regarding High Court. So you need to know regarding that. So this topic will be important from polity point of view, which comes under GS paper 2. And next one, it is about Unite Aware. So recently our External Affairs Minister, he talked about technology and peacekeeping courses. So regarding this, we come up with this platform, that is Unite Aware. So this will be very much important for giving some cooperation and as well as directions for peacekeeping forces. So again, this will be important from our international relations point of view, which comes under GS paper 2. And next one is Wanchua festival. So this festival mainly celebrated by one tribe people, that is Tiwa tribe. So this will be important from our art and culture point of view. And this one is India-Vietnam joint exercise. Again, this will be important from our security and as well as international relations. And next one is 26th round of climate talks. So now we are going to see some highlights regarding what are the steps taken by India to deal with this climate change regarding nationally determined contributions and as well as renewable energy, etc. And this article will be important from environment and ecology point of view. And next one is export growth engine. So in yesterday lecture we studied about one important scheme. So regarding that scheme, regarding some support to our exports, so again we got editorial in today's newspaper. So that is important from our economy point of view. We are going to discuss that. And next one is China nuclear stock. So this article talking about China, it is going to increase its nuclear power. Okay, so because of this, India need to keep an eye on that nuclear stock. So that will be important from our international relations. We are going to see that in a very great detail. So these are the some important topics that we are going to discuss in this today's lecture. So let's get started with our discussion and let us see first article. So before seeing this first article, I want to make a small announcement. So if you want to get the PDF of this lecture, so please join the Telegram channel. So the link of that Telegram channel is given in description box. So please join that Telegram channel to get PDF of this lectures. So first article title we are going to discuss is Only Sharia Law Say the Taliban. So this article mainly talking about the Sharia law. So actually what happened here, recently Islamist group supreme leader, so name of that leader is Haibatullah Akhundzada. Okay, so he mainly gave some statements regarding so how they are going to rule Afghanistan. So this article will be important regarding international relations. So here why I selected this article, because I want to let you know what is the Sharia law and what are the punishments under the Sharia law. So why Afghan people, they are mainly fearing regarding this Taliban because of harsh punishment or extreme punishment under the Sharia law if Taliban comes into rule. So already Taliban already occupied major cities and even Kabul came under control of Taliban, and even president of Afghanistan, he fled to another country, right? So because of this, here we need to know how extreme the punishments will be there under this Sharia law. So now let us try to see context. If you see context, it mainly says that Afghanistan may be governed by a council now that the Taliban. Okay, now Taliban, it is going to govern the council. So if you see details, it mainly says that Taliban would also reach out to former pilots and as well as soldiers from Afghanistan armed forces to join their ranks. So actually what happened, many police and as well as organization and government control, it is nothing there in Afghanistan now. So now Taliban, they want to reach, okay, they will in future reach to former pilots and as well as soldiers from Afghan armed forces to join their ranks again. And many issues regarding how Taliban would run Afghanistan, they have yet to be finalized. That means, so till now there is nothing like a clarity regarding how Taliban they are going to run Afghanistan. So one thing they made clear that Afghanistan would not be a democracy no more. Okay, it would not be a democracy in future, and there will be no democratic system that is going to be seen in Afghanistan. So they will go and rule Afghanistan according to Sharia law. Okay, according to Sharia law, they are going to rule Afghanistan, but there will be no democracy. So this is the one thing which made clear. So now let us try to understand what is this Sharia law. So if you're talking about this Sharia law, it is nothing but a legal system of Islam. Okay, so if you're talking about roots of this Sharia law, so the roots mainly we can find these roots in Quran and Hadiths and Fatahs. So literal definition of Sharia, it is clear, well-trodden path to water. So it is a clear, well-trodden path to water. So this Sharia law mainly lays down governing principles. So for what? For spiritual, mental and physical behavior that Muslims need to adhere to. So what are the spiritual and as well as what are the mental and physical behavior that need to be adhered to by Muslims, that will be given under the Sharia law. And as far as this law also recognizes the acts of followers of Islam into 5 categories. They include obligatory, recommended, permitted, discouraged and forbidden. Okay, and for example, if you see giving and receiving of interest on money which is given, okay, so whenever if I am a Muslim and I am lending any money to so and so person, so giving or receiving interest is it is nothing which is mainly prohibited. So here under the Sharia law, giving and receiving of interest on money which is borrowing or lending, so that is extremely prohibited. And next one is gambling is prohibited, prostitution is prohibited, and even consumption of alcohol is also prohibited under the Sharia law. So there are 5 different schools of Sharia law. So 4 are Sunni doctrines, okay, 1 Shia doctrine. So 4 Sunni doctrines include Hanbali, Maliki, Safli and as well as Hanfi. And Shia doctrine include Shia Jafri. So these are some important details that you need to remember regarding this Sharia law. So if you are focusing on punishments of the Sharia law, they include if there is any adultery must be lashed 100 times. And if unmarried, then they must be exiled for a year. If married, they must be stoned to death. And next one is amputation of hands, that means removing of hands for guilty of theft. And apostasy in a grave crime in Islam. Okay, and there will be death penalty for apostates. And 40 to 80 lashes upon consumption of alcohol. So these are extreme punishments which are given under the Sharia law. And now let us move on to next topic. Title says Supreme Court Collegium not for new judges. So there are names to are given in this article, but it is not much important to remember all these names. So if you see context, it mainly says that Supreme Court Collegium as its meeting approved the elevation of P. Sri Sudha, C. Sumalata and Dr. G. Radharani as judges of Telangana High Court. So there is elevation of 3 judges as judges of Telangana High Court, and the others they were cleared by collegium for elevation to High Court bench. And next one is some people was proposed as judicial member of income tax appellate tribunals. So because of this is in news, and now you need to know some facts regarding what is this collegium system. So if you're talking about this collegium system, it is a system of appointment. It is a system of appointment and as well as transfer of judges that evolved through judgments of Supreme Courts, not by an act of Parliament or by provisions of Constitution. So if we're talking about collegium system, it is mainly talking about system of appointment and transfer of judges. Okay, it is a system of appointment and transfer of judges that has evolved through judgments of Supreme Court. Okay, so this collegium system mainly evolved through systems of judgments which mainly seen in Supreme Court but not by an act of Parliament or by any provisions of our Constitution. So if you're talking about composition of this collegium, collegium is headed by CJI and also comprises of 4 other senior most judges of court. So Supreme Court collegium mainly headed by CJI, Chief Justice of India, and comprises of other 4 senior most judges of the court. And a High Court collegium, I am talking about the Supreme Court collegium, which mainly contains CJI and 4 other senior most judges of court, Supreme Court. And if you are talking about High Court collegium, which mainly led by CJ, okay, CJ, that is Chief Justice of that High Court, and 4 other senior most judges of that court. So if you are talking about constitutional provisions, so Article 124 subclass 2, which mainly talks about judges of the Supreme Court, they are appointed by President. So judges of Supreme Court, they are appointed by President after consultation with such a number of the judges of Supreme Court and as well as High Courts of that state. And if you're talking about next article, Article 217 of Indian Constitution, which mainly talks about judge of High Court, they shall be appointed by President in consultation with the CJI and state governor. Okay, in case of appointment of judge other than CJ, so Chief Justice of High Court. Okay, so these are some important constitutional provisions which mainly talk about appointment of judges of Supreme Court and as well as High Court. And next article, it is about this image. So I found this image, it is very much interesting and it is mainly regarding our art and culture. So in prelims you can get a question regarding what is this Wong Chua festival. Okay, so this image mainly portraying about Wong Chua festival. So you need to know some facts regarding this Wong Chua festival. So now let us try to talk about some details regarding this Wong Chua festival. So the festival mainly celebrated by Tiwa tribesmen. So this festival mainly marks their good harvest. So in this festival they will sing songs and they will do dances and bunch of rituals and people clad in their native attires. If you see this image you can understand, so people they are wearing their native attires and they are performing some dances and as well as they are singing songs, etc. So this takes in the form of pig skulls and bones which act as deities and are preserved through many generations. Okay, so this takes the form of pig skulls and as well as bones which acts as deities as they are preserved through many generations. And people they do plenty of makeup in form of paste made up of rice powder and they participate in dance with this makeup, and as well as they will dance by using some bamboo sticks in their hand. Okay, and Tiwas they pray bountiful harvest as well as protection from pest and as well as natural calamities. So these are some important facts that you need to know regarding this festival. And next one, it is about Tiwa tribe. So if you're talking about this Tiwa tribe, they are also known as Lalung. Okay, Lalung, it is indigenous community which is mainly inhabiting in the states of Assam, Meghalaya, and even they are also found in some parts of Arunachal Pradesh and Manipur. So this Tiwa also known as Lalung. Lalung is indigenous community which mainly inhabiting in the states of Assam, Meghalaya, and they also found in some parts of Arunachal Pradesh and Manipur. And they are recognized as scheduled tribe within the state of Assam. But they still do not benefit this ST status in state of Meghalaya. So these tribes, okay, Tiwa tribes are also known as Lalung and they are indigenous community. They are inhabiting in states of Assam, Meghalaya, and they are also found in some parts of Arunachal Pradesh and even Manipur. So they are recognized as scheduled tribes in states of Assam, but they do not got this scheduled tribe status in state of Meghalaya. And next one is they practice zoom or shifting cultivation. So this is one important thing, right? So in this zoom or shifting cultivation, first they will clear a patch of forest land and they will go for cultivation, and after that, after 2 or 3 years, they will leave that crop and they will again go for next patch of land and they will clear and they will go for cultivation. Okay, so they mainly says that, so the result will be more fertile soil and freshly enriched with potash, and it will be more useful for next bountiful crop. And some important festivals are celebrated by these Tiwa tribes. They include Pisu, that is Bihu, Borot Utsav, Sogra Puja, and Vanchua, Jonbil Mela, Kabla, Langkum Puja, and as well as Yangli Puja. So pig, it is a stable part of their diet and their culture. So these are some important facts that you need to remember regarding this topic. Now let us see next topic. Title says technology to help protect UN peacekeepers. So this article mainly focusing on this United Nations peacekeepers. So to help and to protect these people, so we need to adopt technology. So this is some central idea of this article. So now let us try to see this topic in a very great detail. So that technology here we are going to use is Unite Aware. So we are going to use this Unite Aware. So if you are talking about context of this article, it mainly says that presiding over this United Nations Security Council open debate regarding technology and peacekeeping. So UNSC, United Nations Security Council open debate regarding technology and peacekeeping. Our External Affairs Minister, he mainly talked about technological platform, and our External Affairs Minister, he announced the rollout of this technological platform. Name here is Unite Aware. So if you're talking about details which are given in this topic, it mainly says that this Unite Aware which mainly very much helpful to enhance safety of United Nations peacekeepers. So this Unite Aware which will be very much helpful to enhance safety of United Nations peacekeepers, and India, which is one of the major contributor for this United Nations peacekeeping activities. So why this platform which is mainly announced? Because our United Nations Security Council mainly adopted resolution that pay tribute to peacekeepers, and in this context it also asked member states that had hosted them and to bring justice to those who have killed or committed to acts of violence against them. So in this context here, UNSC mainly asked international community, they must come together to bring better governing for digital space for good. Okay, so actually in which of the countries here United Nations peacekeeping forces are installed or hosted. So what happened here? So there will be some killings, and as well as there will be acts of violence that can be seen against these people. So in this context, we need to host some justice for those people. So in this context, international community, they need to come together and they need to better govern the digital space for good. So in this context, our External Affairs Minister, he came up with this 4-point framework. So this 4-point framework mainly include deployment of proven, cost-effective and field serviceable technologies. So we need to deploy proven and as well as cost-effective and even field serviceable technologies. So this is the first important thing. And this one is peacekeepers mainly needed sound information intelligence. So we need sound information and intelligence. And this one is India is supporting United Nations in rollout of Unite Aware platform. So in this context, India came up with this Unite Aware platform, so which will mainly helpful to coordinate with this United Nations peacekeeping forces. And we need investment. So we need investment in capacity building and training of peacekeepers regarding technology. So incorporating of technology is not at all enough. So we need to train this United Nations peacekeepers how to use this technology. So these are the 4-point framework which came up now. So now let us try to talk about what are some important facts regarding this India and United Nations peacekeeping. So India has consistently been among top troop contributing nations. So India has been consistently among top troop contributing nations to United Nations, and it is the fifth largest. Okay, and it is the fifth largest with 5,424 personnel in 8 countries. So the first important point that you need to remember here is, so India, it is a top contributor, okay, top contributor for this United Nations peacekeeping forces, and it is the fifth largest. India, it is the fifth largest with 5,424 personnel in 8 countries. And India's contribution to regular budget is 0.83 percentage and 0.16 percentage of peacekeeping budget. Okay, so India, it is mainly contributing for regularly budget. And next one is, India is so far participated in 51 out of 71 missions. So out of 71 missions, India participated in 51 missions. Okay, and contributed over 2 lakh personnels. And India also has some troop deployment in countries like Lebanon, Golan Heights area. And next one is Congo, South Sudan, etc. And India also has set up 2 field hospitals in South Sudan and also one in Congo. And since 2018, India has opted a containment of Kazakhstan at mission in Lebanon. So these are some important facts that you need to remember regarding this topic. And now let us see next topic. Title says India-Vietnam navies hold joint exercise. So this article talking about India-Vietnam navies. So if you see context, it mainly says that navies of India and Vietnam, they undertook bilateral exercise in South China Sea. So in South China Sea region, in navies of India and Vietnam, they undertook a bilateral exercise. Okay, so navies of India and Vietnam, they undertook bilateral exercise in South China Sea. So because of this is in news, and this topic will be important from our security and even from our international relations point of view. So now let us try to see some important details of this topic. So 4 frontline ships of Indian Navy, they are on an overseas deployment over 2 months. So over 2 months onwards in Southeast Asia and as well as South China Sea and Western Pacific region. So 4 frontline ships of Indian Navy, they are deployed. And they are taking some calls and as well as exercises in this area. So in this exercise, exclusively like guided missile destroyer, that is INS Ranvijay, and as well as missile covert INS Kora, they undertook exercise along with Vietnam's People Navy Frigate. Okay, along with this Vietnam's People Navy Frigate. So our guided missile destroyer, that is INS Ranvijay, and as well as missile covert, that is INS Kora, they participated in this exercise. So if you're talking about some important facts regarding this sea phase exercise, so this sea phase exercise mainly include surface warfare exercise, weapon firing drills, and as well as helicopter operations. So they mainly include surface warfare exercise, weapon firing drills, and as well as helicopter operations. And in this way, this phase also has enhanced interoperability and as well as adaptability. So these are some important things that you need to remember. And now let us try to see next topic. Title says Global Good Trade continues recovery according to WTO Trade Barometer. So this article mainly says that as we know, due to this COVID-19 pandemic, so international borders have been shut down and there is decreasing of trade that we can see due to disruption in supply chain disruptions. So now here WTO Trade Barometer says that yes, now there is recovery of global good trade. Okay, it is talking about global good trade. So now this article will be important from our economy point of view, which mainly comes under GS paper 3. So now let us try to understand this topic in a very great detail. So if you see context, it mainly says that global merchandise trade. Okay, global merchandise trade is continuing its robust recovery from shock of COVID-19 pandemic. So from shock of this COVID-19 pandemic, here trade which has continued its recovery, as per WTO's Goods Trade Barometer. So as per WTO's Good Trade Barometer, there is increasing of trade, that is we can see there is recovery of trade that is shown, okay, that is shown here. So we are coming out of the shock of this COVID-19 pandemic. So here this article mainly says that this barometer which is showing hit a record high trade, merchandise trade. So now let us try to see some important details. So if you see details, it mainly says that the rise in the barometer. So what it mainly reflects? So this rise in barometer which mainly reflects both strength of current trade of expansion. So it mainly shows there is strength of current trade of expansion, and there is also depth of pandemic induced shock in 2020. So it reflects the strength of current trade of expansion and also depth of pandemic induced shock in 2020. So overall it mainly says that there is outlook of world trade continued to be overshadowed by risk such as regional disparities, continuous weakness in services trade and lagging in vaccination timetables. So though there is some recovery that we are seeing in only the goods, but now we are also facing some concerns. So what are these concerns? So the concern here is we are seeing some regional disparities, and there is also continued weakness in services trade, and there is also lagging in vaccination timetables. Okay, so these are some concerns we are mainly facing. So if you're talking about World Trade Organization Trade Barometer, so you need to know some important facts, right? So what are these World Trade Organization Trade Barometer? So here WTO has developed a set of indicators. So these indicators, they will provide a real-time information regarding trends of world trade, how it is going on. So those indicators are called as this WTO trade barometers. So here it is separately for goods and as well as services. So if you are talking about goods, so leading indicator that signals the changes in the world trade growth 2 to 3 months ahead of merchandise trade volume statistics. So here this goods indicator which mainly signals that what is a change that is happening across the world trade. Okay, so what is a change that is happening across the world, that mainly shown in this WTO goods trade barometer. And if you're talking about services indicator, so this services indicator mainly illustrates current state of services trade. It mainly shows current state of services trade slightly ahead of official statistics. So in this way here both barometers, they are intended to complement conventional trade statistics and forecast. So in this way here both barometers, they are intended to complement conventional trade statistics and forecast. So this is the gist of this topic, and now let us try to see next article. So there are two articles which is mainly talking about what are the goals or what are the things which are mainly done by India to achieve its targets. So title says India can do more, hints climate official. And next article here is India, it is on track to meet climate goals. So now let us try to see context first. Here Alok Sharma, he is the president designate of United Nations Conference of Parties, that is in this COP. Here president candidate, he is Alok Sharma. He mainly said that we hoping India would consider more ambitious emission targets in near future. So if you're talking about some details, it mainly says that India, it is on track mainly to achieve its nationally determined contributions under its Paris climate deal. And a major theme building ahead climate talks to be held in Glasgow, Scotland. So we are going to hold this COP26, that is Conference of Parties, that is regarding climate talks. So the major theme building which is ahead of climate talks to be held in Glasgow, Scotland. So question here, the questions of how many nations they can commit a net zero, it is one of the questions they are mainly thinking about now. So if you're talking about carbon neutrality, so what is the carbon? That is amount of carbon dioxide which is released is equal to amount of carbon dioxide which is absorbed. So this is called as carbon neutrality. So regarding this carbon neutrality, over 120 countries they have committed with varying degrees of firmness, and they are going to reach this carbon neutrality by 2050. And 5 countries they have this net zero pledges for after 2050 here, including Australia as well as Singapore. So if you're talking about commitments of China, it is the world's biggest emitter of emissions, right? So which has committed to peaking emissions before 2030, and it will achieve net zero by 2060. And if you're talking about United States, it is going to achieve its net zero by 2050. So these are some important data that you need to remember regarding this carbon neutrality. So if you're talking about what are the steps that are taken by India, and this part will be important when you are writing your mains answer. So if you're talking about data, it mainly says that renewable energy, India's NDC, that is national determined contributions, which mainly include reducing the emissions intensity of GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030, and that will be below 2005 levels. So first important commitment of India is, so we are going to reduce our emission intensity of GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030. And we are going to increase a share of non-fuel based, that means we are mainly moving towards renewable energy sources, and we are going to increase renewable energy sources of 40% of installed electric power capacity by 2030. And next one is, we are going to get some technology. So whenever we want to achieve this target, we need some help. So with the help of transfer of technology and as well as low cost international finance, including Green Climate Fund, so we are going to create additional carbon sink of 2.3 to 5 gigatons of carbon dioxide. That will be done by 2030. So this is the one more important target of India. And next one is, we are also committed to install 450 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030, of which 100 gigawatts is reportedly installed. Okay. So we have committed to install 450 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030, of which 100 gigawatts is reportedly installed. And next one here is, India in 2016 committed to phase down of hydrofluorocarbons. So these hydrofluorocarbons mainly used in refrigerators, right? So here India already came up with a commitment to phase down or to decrease the use of hydrofluorocarbons in 4 steps from 2032 with 10% reduction and 20% reduction by 2037 and 30% reduction in 2042 and 80% reduction by 2047. So these are some important key steps which are taken by or the targets of India to address this climate change. So this part will be very important from your mains. And now let us try to see next topic. Title says a delayed intervention. So this article mainly talking about recent step which is taken by government regarding export boost. So background of this topic we already discussed in our yesterday's lecture. So if you see central theme of this article, which mainly says that with global demand booming, so there is an increase in global demand, center now it must act faster and to come up or to increase export growth regime. So here it is talking about here, due to this COVID-19 pandemic, we have many disruptions in our economy and almost the exports have been decreased, right? And there is no proper international trade due to shutdown of international borders. So now here we can see some revival in this global demand. So now government need to take much steps to boost our exports. So if you're talking about context, it mainly says that government has notified the rules and rates which are on which exporters they can claim rebates on taxes paid on their outbound cargo. So here recently here our government came up with some rules and as well as rates. So these rates are mainly based on exporters. Exporters now they can claim some rebate, that means decrease or reduce in the taxes that need to be paid regarding this whatever the exports they are doing. So actually this step mainly mainly taken recently, but actually the new scheme which came up 8 months earlier. So it took 8 months to come up with these critical details by government regarding this new scheme, that is RODTEP. So RODTEP mainly stands for Remission of Duties and Taxes on Export Products. So why this scheme came up by the government? Because US mainly filed some case in WTO dispute settlement body regarding what are the schemes to come up by government of India that mainly leading to violation of this WTO norms. So because of this, now government came up with a new scheme, and this new scheme mainly going to replace erstwhile merchandise export incentive scheme. So if you don't know which are the schemes, so please watch the yesterday's lecture for sure. And this scheme mainly covers about 8,855 tariff lines, and it will covers almost 65% of India's exports. And the remission rates now notified are ranging from 0.5% to 4.3% of freight on board value. And if you're talking about some exclusions here, so steel is excluded, pharmaceutical excluded, and as well as chemicals are excluded under this scheme. So what are the cause of concerns regarding this scheme? So some engineering firms and as well as some other raw material regarding thing, so they are not adequately offsetted under this scheme. So it is one important cause of concern. So if you're talking about target of government of India, here it is, we need to increase our exports to $400 billion. So but here to achieve this target, we are facing some challenges. So these challenges are very important. So first one is India came out of RCEP, and how can we now achieve the target of exports of $400 billion? And next one is we need to reignite again free trade pact negotiations with Australia and as well as UK, European Union and the US mainly to achieve this target. And next one is global economy. It is on cusp of one of its strongest rebounds of this COVID-19 vaccination. So many countries they went for vaccination, but in India we are seeing still slow pace of vaccination. So it is also one important cause of concern now. And next one is private investments. They are unlikely to take off in our economy. So these are some important challenges we are going to face. And this is a gist of this topic, and let me know what are the suggestions that you can give mainly to achieve this target of our exports or to $400 billion, and let me know your suggestions in comment box for sure. And now let us see next topic. So before saying this topic, I want to make a small announcement on this platform. So if you want to clear UPSC 2022, we came up with one excellent, highly beneficial and also highly economical course, that is current affairs package along with mains answer writing practice. So how this course will be useful to clear UPSC 2022? So one thing I want to say here is before entering into examination hall, you need to know at least 1.5 years current affairs for sure. And this is right time to join this course to cover this 1.5 years current affairs in a comprehensive manner. So why you need to focus on this current affairs? Because in prelims, in mains and even in interview, so you will get questions from current affairs. Okay, so you need to focus on this current affairs for sure to clear this exam. And next one is mains answer writing practice. Many students they ignore this mains answer writing practice. So due to this, they will not clear UPSC mains for sure. So even though if you are working hard and if you clear prelims, you cannot clear mains without answer writing practice. So in this course, we are mainly focusing on how to improve your answer writing skills. And next one is if you join this course, we also conduct prelims test on every Sunday, and we provide you video explanation part. So in this way, this course which is designed as per demand of UPSC. So finally, I want to say one thing. Please don't take this course as a choice. Try to join this course as soon as possible and achieve your dream of clearing UPSC. So details of this course it is given in description box. So please visit that once. And if you want to talk to me directly, you can call to this number 8074765513. Okay. Now let's come back and let us see next topic. Title says keeping an eye on China's expanding nuclear stock. So what is the title here? Keeping an eye on China's expanding nuclear stock. So if you see central theme of this article which mainly says that So even if there is contention about the scope and prospective size of Beijing's capabilities, India needs to be watchful. That means already we know that if you are comparing with India, China, which is very much superior regarding this nuclear capabilities. But even though if there are some questions, some dilemmas regarding the scopes and perspective of size of this Chinese capabilities regarding this nuclear, but India need to be watchful regarding that. So now let us try to understand why other who is saying like that. So if you're talking about details, it mainly says that People's Republic of China, that is PRC, Chinese Army, which is mainly expanding. So sorry, if you're talking about this People's Republic of China, okay, China, which is mainly trying to expanding its size, okay, its size of its nuclear arsenals. They are going to build more missiles, okay. So now China is mainly going to increase or expanding their nuclear capabilities and nuclear arsenals, and they are also building more missiles, okay. So this is one important thing that you need to remember. So where they are increasing, so if you see here, let us consider this as northern part. So here we have Jammu and Kashmir, here we have Ladakh. So here we have this Xinjiang province. So in this Xinjiang province, so there is large number of construction of nuclear missiles that is happening here. Okay, so it is a one of important cause of concern, and they are also finding there should be larger nuclear force which mainly based on land-based capabilities in this Xinjiang region. So in this Xinjiang region, China is mainly increasing their nuclear forces and as well as land-based capabilities. And not only this, even there are many reports, they are mainly saying that China had built a site with 120 silos in the arid region of Yunnan. So in Yunnan region, there are about 120 missile silos which are present in this Gansu province of China. So what are the reason why Chinese which is going for increasing of its nuclear base? Because they want to increase survivability of its arsenals against first strike from their nuclear adversaries. For example, from US, whenever if there is any attacks from US, they want to be much capable to retaliate. So because of this, mainly to increase the survivability of its arsenals against its first strike for their nuclear adversaries, the most of the prominently from US. So if there is any strike from US or any other nuclear adversaries, they want to prepare for that. So if you're talking about some important data regarding nuclear development in China, so two important reports like that is SIPRI. According to Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, that is SIPRI, and also Federation of American Scientists, they mainly said that Chinese nuclear forces, they stand roughly between 250 to 350 warheads, nuclear warheads. So Chinese is having about 250 to 350 nuclear warheads. It is according to SIPRI and as well as Federation of American Scientists report. And second report, it is the United States Strategic Command. United States Strategic Command Chief Admiral, he mainly stated that here PRC, China, which is going to double its nuclear capability, double by next decade. So these are the some two important data which mainly saying about nuclear presence or nuclear development in China. And one more thing you need to focus here is China's nuclear tripled ballistic forces, whether it may be, I can say, land-based, sea-based or air-based, they are mainly going for certainly improvement of this capabilities of China. So China is also coming up with this intercontinental ballistic missile. That means from one continent we can attack another continent. So here the range will be more than 5,000 kilometers. Okay, and the next one here is it is talking about intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities, and even they are going for improving their intermediate range ballistic missile capabilities. For example, Dongfeng 41 and as well as DF-26. So let me know intercontinental ballistic missile in India. So which is the intercontinental ballistic missile in India? So let me know in comment box. And why, what Delhi need to track, okay, what Delhi should track. So if you're talking about why we need to focus on this track, because so the growth of Chinese nuclear arsenal might not have immediate impact on India, But across this LAC region, we are seeing military standoff that is seen. So because of this, so as we all know, Xinjiang province, which is a very much important for strategically important for Chinese, because if there is increasing presence of troops or nuclear development in this area, then easily it can occupy this Aksai Chin region, so and so, right? So here, because of this, here Xinjiang province, it is very much important for strategically for China and even India. So for this, whenever there is increasing nuclear development in this region, so in future it might be a threat for India. And next one here is, even though at LAC regions we need to go for disengagement still in some regions like Depsing region, Demchuk, and as well as Hot Spring region. So in this Gogra region we saw disengagement, right? And next one is the strategic balance between India and China. It is unlikely altered due to this Chinese nuclear expansion. So whenever Chinese are going for nuclear expansion, the strategic balance between China and India will be altered. So regarding this, India need to keep a close eye regarding neighbor, and we need to work according to that strategic capabilities. So this is gist of this topic. I hope it is clear. So by this we are concluding today, and for PDF of this lecture, so please join the Telegram channel, link which is given in description box. So by this we are concluding today. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to like, share and comment my videos. And don't forget to enroll to this current affairs package. Thank you so much.